I call the Honourable Member Charles Chauvel.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. Just want to say first off that I appreciate the Minister taking a call immediately after Mr Hipkins' contribution in the committee stages and the bona fide attempt to address the questions that were raised. I said in my earlier contribution that I had one or two questions around the first part of the legislation, and I do hope that the Minister will be minded to take a call and answer those questions. I suppose the first question is, why does the Minister feel that he needs separate legislation to effect this change? Was any consideration given to simply enacting this amendment under the Canterbury emergency legislation? Because on my reading of that legislation, it could have been accomplished by an order in council under the emergency legislation. And while normally no one on this side of the House would advance that as a preferred option, the reality is that at least there would have been better scrutiny if that course had been adopted than this legislation will receive from this process. Because under the Canterbury emergency legislation, there would have been a two-stage scrutiny process. First, the expert panel headed by Sir John Hanson would have scrutinised the legislation. Secondly, the Regulations Review Committee would have considered the legislation under the standing orders grounds. Under the process that the Minister has chosen, the only scrutiny that the legislation receives is the half an hour or so that we're devoting to it in this committee of the whole. So I would be interested in knowing whether the Minister and his colleagues did consider using the process that they've put in place to deal with Canterbury emergencies, given that this is, we're told and we accept, a question arising out of such an emergency, because at least there would have been that better scrutiny. And if not, why instead are we here dealing with all of this under urgency as we are? Mr Chairman, the Minister dealt with one of my concerns because it was raised by Mr Hipkins that related to the issue of drawing the boundaries for the next election. He said, well, it's been done on tighter timeframes before, but it would be useful to hear from the Minister about what assurances the Māori Party received concerning the Māori electoral option. And well, good on the Māori Party for seeking those assurances. I'm not attributing any negative attribution to that exercise, but it would be useful to know what the assurance was, because I think members on this side of the House would also be interested to know and to be assured that the Māori electoral option has been preserved safely and won't be jeopardised in its administration by the proposal to move the census forward 2 years. Similarly, as I mentioned in my earlier speech, in response to an admission by the Minister that a proper admission that he'd canvassed the issue of population-based funding for DHBs with his colleague, the Minister for Health, what is to be done in order to secure health board funding on a rational basis, given the moving of the census forward 2 years. And finally, sir, the concern that I referred to earlier on this part related to the language that's used in the legislation and the explanatory note. It would be useful, I think, to have an assurance from the Minister on the record that the deferral of the proclamation process is intended as a one-time only exercise, that it's not intended to be something that will now be done away with by way of an erosion of the independence of the Chief Government Statistician, because as was indicated earlier, there is a reason for that process. It is important and it exists as a significant feature of the statute. And finally, sir, it would be useful to have an assurance from the Minister that he is concerned, as I am, that the apparent breach of the principle in Fitzgerald and Muldoon contained in the explanatory note is an accident, sir.
I call the